we can share that with folks. So I want to primarily answer your questions tonight. And I want to prepare you to do your portfolio entries really well. So why don't we start with, what questions do you have about writing portfolio entries for your credential work? And you could unmute yourselves and share that, or put that in the chat. And maybe you don't have questions right now. So I'll just share my screen and sort of walk you through the process, if that works for you. I want this to be fairly informal tonight, and I want to share with you some things that that you might not have seen on the video. Let me get rid of some things on my screen that you might not have seen on the video that was in the orientation module. And if you haven't seen that yet, that does give you a good grounding for what the purpose of the portfolio is and how to write it. And essentially the purpose of the portfolio is to demonstrate your skills in writing. You know, you're going to be observed by your advisor at least 3 different occasions, and also an endorser at the very end of the process. But you'll also have a chance to talk about your skills when you meet with the endorser. But the documentation is really your place to showcase your skills. So a portfolio entry, and let's just go back to that description. Portfolio entry in the orientation module, I just wanted you to do one so that you could get some feedback on that before you proceed to the rest of it. And a portfolio entry is an indicator about your skills within a skill area. So let me bring up this is the assignment within the class. Let me bring up, well, first of all, let me show you where to find. I hope that you've all found the SAC Credential Manual, but just in case you haven't, go to the networkforyouthsuccess.org and get rid of the little COVID responsibility announcement there, and go to professional development, and then under school age credential, you'll see that the SAC Credential Manual is right here. That's something you want to download, and you want to get that right in front of you, always to have available, because you will refer to it often. Especially, you'll see there are many chapters in this. Not all of them are important for you to know about right now, right? So the one that I want to focus in on tonight is the chapter 2, which is about the competency standards. Those are the competency standards for all 14 skill areas. And another one that's useful when you're thinking about writing your portfolio and your resource file is chapter 4, because that's all about documenting your competencies. But chapter 2 is where I want to go first. So that's on page 19. So I'm going to scroll to page 19. And you'll see that all of the skill areas are listed under chapter 2. And then the next page is a description of how they're set up. And I'm going to leave you to read that yourself. But then I want to go to the first page, which is the first skill area, which skill area 1 is professionalism. And that's where I want you to start. The course is done in order. So we want you to start with skill area 1 and then move to skill area 2, 3, 4 as the schedule indicates. So the schedule is clearly posted within the course. I can show you again back to the course. So you see that orientation is supposed to be from September 1st through the 13th. So Grantley, I know you're just joining us now, so you'll need to catch that up, because then when we go to skill area 1, we go back to orientation, you have all of these learning activities to do. Some of them are resources, but then when we go to skill area 1, it should be happening between September 14th and the 27th. 27th is your deadline date for that. And there's a video and description of when things are due and how you need to turn those in, all in the orientation module. So I'm going to go back to the manual again. We're going to start, one of the first assignments in the orientation module is to write your portfolio entry. And I think I have them for Mia and for Tyrecia. So that's one of the tasks that you're going to take on, Grantley, too. And the whole point of what you write in your portfolio is to prove that you meet the standards within the skill area 1. Okay, so within each skill area, we have standards, and the standards, the competency standards, are all the ones that are numbered. So they're numbered 1, 1. That's the first standard in skill area 1. And 1, 2, that's the second standard in skill area 1. And then 1, 3 is the one that I suggested that you would write about for your first draft portfolio entry, so that I can give you some feedback on that and see that we're both confident that you know how to write it according to the regulation, to the requirements of the credential. So now that I've shown you that page, I want to flip over to this this view of that page. I just took a screenshot so that I could do some things on that. So I like to aim you to write about things that are not observable, because when your advisor comes to see you working with your kids, they're going to be able to see for themselves things that are easily observed, right? So I want to aim you at things that are not so easily observed. So standard 1.1 is pretty observable, because most of the advisors that you're going to be having will have an understanding of the school age care regs, and they will recognize a violation right away. So they'll know whether you're in compliance with those regs or not, and they will talk to you about that and coach you to get into compliance if you're not. So they'll observe that for themselves. So that one you don't really need to write and prove to them or me in writing, because they can see it for themselves. Also, they can, the 1.2, the standard 1.2, I don't recommend that you write that one about that one either, because this is about you seeing yourself as a professional, and your advisor is going to see how you're dressed. You know, your advisor is going to see whether you're there on time, or whether you're, you know, whether you are acting reliably. And they will know, are you meeting your deadlines and things like that, because of what they see. So that one's pretty observable as well. But I do want you to write about competency standard 1.3. And I picked this one partly because it's not so observable, because if you look at the indicators, which are the bullets underneath that standard, if you look at those things, your advisor will not see you attending a conference or a workshop. They will not see you reading a professional magazine or a newsletter. So those things are not observable. They're the kinds of things that happen behind the scenes, right? Now, there are a couple of things here that I don't want you to write about. I don't want you, whoops. That was odd. Let me try that again. I don't want you to write a, whoops, wrong place. Let me get rid of that. I don't want you to write about belonging to a professional organization, because that's in your, pull this up here and say, that's in your resource file. Now, your resource file is a separate document. We didn't talk about that much in your orientation module. You'll encounter it in skill area 1. The resource file is primarily a collection of things that are useful to have in one place, plus some, quite a few actually, lesson plans and activity plans, so that you have those started and gathered in one place as well. Okay, so there's a whole list of the resource file items in chapter 4 of the manual. You'll want to look at what that list is and use that to check them off. I'm going to show you a tool that I provided a little bit later that will do that too. So I don't want you to write about belonging to a professional organization, because that's a resource file item. You'll provide evidence in your resource file that you already do that. I don't want you to duplicate. I don't want you to do to write about something that's already in your resource file. I also don't want you to write about being registered in the Aspire registry, because that too is in your resource file. Okay, so what I want you to write about are workshops that you attended or newsletters that you read. Okay, and I want you to focus first on one workshop. So as we get into the process of writing a portfolio entry, I want to show you why it's useful to just write one. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of some other things here on the screen for a minute so you can just see the portfolio template that I provided, and that's also in the orientation module. I think I also put it in skill area 1, so you can download this and copy it, make it a file in your credential file, and then you'll have it always, and you'll be able to have the questions that you have to answer for each portfolio entry right there. Okay, so who's gone to a training workshop in the last, oh, let's say 6 months? Somebody has.
Virtually, I would say, yeah.
Okay, great, Tarisha. What let's do this portfolio entry then about this that training workshop that you went to. Okay, so
Okay.
I'm going to put your name right in here. I'm gonna sort of you know, draft it for you. Okay, so you can see how it works. Okay, so your name, your full name there, and then we're going to say skill area 1. And I'm going to ask that you always also include the title of the skill area. That's I see that as a professional courtesy, because I actually do have all of the skill areas memorized by number, but your advisor, your endorser may not. So, you know, remind them what this is about, right? Just put the title in there. So this is about professionalism. So skill area 1 title is professionalism. And the standard that I want you to write about is right here, standard 1.3. And I can, well, I guess I can't type that. I can't do that. So the standard number is 1.3. Now I'll tell you one of the things that I saw on some of your colleagues, your classmates, portfolio entry drafts for this assignment in the orientation module. I saw them say this was for competency standard 1. I don't know what that means, right? Your endorser and your advisor who will read your document won't know what that means either. There is not a competency standard just 1. The whole thing you want to say standard 1.3. Now the other thing that's important is again, because I don't have all of the standards memorized. There are a lot of them. And your advisor and your endorser will not have all the standards memorized by number either. So you need to type in what that standard statement says. So in this case, it has and is continually developing competencies in child development, programming, communication skills, and other topics related to children. Now, in the standard itself, in the manual, it says by, and then it has a colon. Leave the by out, because I don't need you to indicate, I don't need you to include any of the indicators that are listed. If they're, I want you to refer to those indicators in how you answer the first question on your portfolio entry, but I don't want you to type in the indicators here. Okay, everybody clear on that? Give me a thumbs up. Yep. Okay, good. That has to be every portfolio entry you write, all 42 of them, has to have, it's required, has to have the competency standard statement written out. Okay, every one of them. Now, when you're working with the document online or in your own files, you can just scroll over that document and copy the portfolio or the competency standard statement and paste it right into your own document. That's just fine. Okay. Okay, so Teresia, what was the training that you went to? What was it about?
The last training I was on was actually today, and it was just about a refresher on child abuse.
Okay, so on this today, September 16th, I attended a child abuse prevention, right?
Yes.
Refresher trainer training, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's all you need to write for that one. Now, I'd like to have you, well, I don't know. I'll come back to something I want to address in a moment, which is all about focusing on one way you meet the standard. Okay, just focus on one way. Makes everything else easier. And we'll go through a sort of a situation after we draft this out. So how did you do that? Was that something that was provided by your agency?
Yeah, well, they gave us the website to go on to, and we literally just went through the Department of Health, and it was like just a video that I had to watch and respond to questions throughout the 2-hour training.
Okay, so your supervisor told you about?
Yeah, my supervisor told me about it.
Okay, so my supervisor informed me of the online child abuse and maltreatment. Monique is joining us, so let me do that. Welcome, Monique. We're in the process of drafting a portfolio entry right now. So a child abuse prevention and maltreatment training offered by the Department of Health, right?
Yes.
And I would typically ask you to spell out department just because it looks more professional when you do. I'm sort of trying to do this speedily today, so I will do that now. I went online, watched video, and probably took a quiz at the end of the.
It was, yeah, quizzes throughout it and a quiz at the end.
Took quizzes throughout and at the end of the training. Okay, that's all we need to know about that. All right, so again, straightforward, simple, focused. Okay, why was it important for you to do this as a professional, Teresia?
Well, for 2 reasons: just to have a refresher, and also I needed additional hours to be tracked for my licensing, and like I said, just to have a refresher of, especially because the new school year is coming up.
Okay, so let's say as a new school year begins, I was glad to get refreshed on this important topic. And the training contributed to my required hours of professional development, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Then here's what I consider the most important question. Okay. And up till now, we have been able to answer the questions with one sentence, and that's been perfectly adequate. That's not adequate under this fourth and most important question, because the whole credential is about you demonstrating your knowledge and skills working with children and how to help them grow. Right?
Mhm.
That's the whole point of the credential. That's what we're really looking for. So we're looking for, what do you know about what kids need and what skills they need for themselves, right? So how do you provide, how do you meet children's needs where they are, and then help them grow and learn skills so they can meet their own needs in positive and effective ways, right? That is the basis for youth development. It's meeting needs and teaching skills. So in this most important question, I want to see that you do know what kids need and that you are involved in teaching them skills, right? That makes sense? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. Okay, great. That's what I want to see in every single portfolio entry, okay? Because then your portfolios, all together, they will demonstrate that you really get kids. You know what they need. You meet those needs and you help them learn how to meet their own needs, right? That's how kids grow up, right? So for a child abuse prevention training, why is that important to children's development? This question takes some thought,
Mhm.
right? And I want to see evidence of that thought in what you write. So what's some thinking? And Tyrese is on the spot here, but the rest of you could chime in and help her. What do you think? Why is the child abuse prevention training important for children's development?
Just because you just want to recognize and make sure that the children are safe, they're not demonstrating any signs of abuse or neglect that may be happening at home that's transferring over into the school setting. We want to make sure that we're just providing them a safe environment and knowing that, when they enter the building that they are in a safe environment and that they can share anything that is going on in the household that may be affecting them physically, emotionally.
This is one area that if kids are impacted by being abused in whatever the category, that can really hinder development. It is our task as caregivers to ensure that this doesn't happen. It's so essential to the development.
Yeah, absolutely right on, Grantley, that it certainly does affect them socially and emotionally, and it also affects them cognitively and sometimes physically. I mean, kids can be physically in danger, right? So we want them to not be physically in danger. And if we see signs of that, we want to be able to interrupt the potential abuse that might be happening to a child, because they can't start to heal from that abuse until the abuse stops, right? So we need to make sure that we want kids to be safe, right? So in order for kids to grow, they need to feel safe. They need to be safe, right? So how do we say that? Why is this important to children's development? Writing can sometimes be a challenge, right? And that's why it takes a little thought. It takes a little thought to figure out how to put all that into words. So again, we're looking at probably 2 or 3 sentences that are well considered, well thought out sentences that express why this is so important to children's development.
Maybe just perhaps we just want them to, like you said, we want them to be in a safe environment, and we want them to flourish as children so they can ultimately be productive adults in our community.
Okay, so in order to flourish, and what does that look like? That mean that
they're receiving an education, they're coming to school, they're being responsible, they're socially developing themselves with their peers, and I guess just growing throughout the years and eventually moving on to, their next phases in life and being just productive individuals in society.
how's that what I typed? I can enlarge that if that would help. In order to flourish and learn academically and socially, to be able to become productive individuals in society, children must be safe. Right? That's a great first sentence. What else can we say?
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
My
And
apologies.
Monique, would you please show your camera too so we can see your face?
Sure, I apologize. I'm actually at a funeral. I stepped out to join.
Oh, well, goodness, I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, what I wanted to add to that was children must also children must also feel safe to express themselves, as she said, emotionally. That way they can be able to receive direction and be able to speak to people so that they can receive positive direction and feedback.
Okay. So it
was a lot.
flourish and learn socially and emotionally. Yeah.
Yes, and just to speak on the safe aspect, they have to be near or around someone who they trust or feel comfortable around so that they can seek guidance from individuals. And they also need role models as well.
Okay, so they need to be safe and supported by trusted adults. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And we need to say something back that relates back to child abuse, right? Because that's how we answered the first question. We always want to make sure that every question here relates back to the first question, which is what we did, right? So we have to be talking about what we did. So how does this relate back to child abuse? Should we say when children are abused? They lose
trust in the adults around them that they assume should have protected them.
Okay, they lose trust in adults who should have protected them.
Or that they believe should have protected them.
Well, I think it's fair to say that adults should protect children, shouldn't they? Shouldn't that be true for all adults?
It should.
But your point is well taken. The kids don't always have a firm grasp on reality. And if they have been in an abusive situation, they may not know that that's true, that all adults should protect them. But they should have protected them. So what else do they lose? Grantley, you talked about this.
And growth is impaired.
So, and their growth is impaired. Okay. And how is it impaired? Because this could be very useful.
Emotionally, some case can be physically too.
Okay, so it could be,
Um,
I'm gonna suggest that we'll start with emotionally, because that's usually scars will fade, but
yeah,
emotional scars stick around for a long time. So emotionally, socially, and physically,
physically it can be too. Yes.
and also cognitively. When kids are abused, they just don't learn very well. And we can understand why. If they're afraid all the time, how can they have the attention, the capacity to pay attention and learn some other things? And there's some evidence that it actually affects brain development and their capacity to learn, right? So, so this is there. And so, and then what are we going to do about it, right? So recognizing signs, and I would actually even say potential signs of abuse is important to ensure. What'd you say, Grantley?
How is it to prevent, well, we're talking about their growth, to prevent stopping the abuse that affects their growth.
Okay, so to stop abuse
To intervene.
affects their growth. Yeah, intervene would be a good word. Okay. This training prepared me to recognize potential signs of abuse and helped me know how to proceed, right? How to report, just say that, how to report and possibly intervene. And I say possibly because some reports are not going to be warranted, right? Not going to be indicated in the Child Protective Service language, but that's not our call to make. So, so recognizing the signs means then that we can report that. And in fact, we are mandated reporters, which that might be an also thing to put into the why it's important to you as a professional. You need to know what to do because you're mandated to do that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so here's an example. So an example is most compelling, most convincing when it can be about one or maybe two children, right? You think about, you think about two phrases. I'll just pull some out of the air here. Children are our future. Okay. They're our future what? Okay. Compare that phrase, children are our future, to we need children to grow and learn so that they are ready to take responsible positions in the world, such as responsible work, to be good parents, to raise their children to be future leaders. Which of those is more compelling?
That second one.
Yeah, it's the one with the details, right? It's the one with the specifics. It's sort of defining what children are a future, what that means, right? So the example is, what does it look like? You know, what is something that absolutely shows that this was important to do? Okay. Now, for this particular entry, unless you have dealt with a child, unless you have made a report on potential signs of child abuse, it may be a little challenging to come up with an example. But perhaps you have. And if you have, well, that's a grand example to use. But let's suppose you haven't yet, because you may, right? So what example could you say about what you learned and how it will affect one or two children in your program? Again, this takes some thought, right? But the example gives a window into your thinking, and it gives a window into your work with kids. It gives a window into your attitude and what kids might experience with you. So you may not have made a report, but I'll bet in your programs you have your eye on some kids that you wonder about. Am I right? You have your eye on some kids that maybe act out a lot, that maybe maybe they don't get along with other kids, maybe they have sudden rages, they have some impulse and anger control kinds of issues. Maybe you see some families and some family interaction that makes you a little uncomfortable. Anybody got any of those experiences?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So you've got some kids in mind, right? Kids that maybe aren't learning as well, as kids are struggling in school. Maybe they're not learning as well. Maybe they're having some behavioral issues. Are you going to keep a special eye on those kids and
Yes.
look for potential signs?
Yes, it makes me more susceptible as to what to expect.
Okay. Okay. So let's say we unbold that. In our program, we have, think of one or two kids, Grantley.
Kids that seems at risk.
Okay, so we have, let's get even more specific. Let's talk about a fourth grade boy. Okay. Okay, we don't want to necessarily use names here, especially when something that's potentially could be negative. But just describing a fourth grade boy who
Complaints.
struggles in school.
Mhm.
What was that, Mia?
I was gonna say maybe we have this fourth grade boy named John who struggles with using the bathroom alone. Like showing signs of nervousness. Maybe like showing signs of sexual behavior with other kids. speaking sexual behavior, like saying inappropriate words.
Withdrawn.
And occasionally erupts in anger. Right? This is a child that I will observe carefully. And work to build trust with, right?
Yeah.
Work to observe carefully to see signs I learned about in the training. And work to build trust with. Okay, that paints a picture, right? That paints a picture, and if I read that and I'm your advisor and I come into your program, I'm going to be looking for kids that might observe that behavior, and I'm going to be there to help back you up in case you think you have seen some signs, and to help guide you through a process of reporting if that becomes something that needs to happen. Okay, that gives me a window into what you do with kids, right? That's a great example. Okay, you see somebody put something in the chat here and I don't have that chat box open. No problem. Okay, so Teresa had to leave early because her daughter was fussing. That's a reasonable thing. So that becomes, didn't put in the date written, that's required every time too. So that became a portfolio entry that we wrote together. Now I said that I was going to go back and say and tell you again how how not focusing on something would be more difficult. So remember that we were trying to meet this standard, has and is continually developing competencies in child development, programming, communication skills, and other topics related to children, right? And we could have chosen that we attended this 2-day workshop, two-day training, but it was about a lot of different topics and we were going to talk about the whole thing. Okay, so I attended a 2-day training, and yeah, my supervisor said I should go there and paid the registration fee, so I went, and it was important to me because, well, gosh, I learned a lot. You know, there were a lot of things going on, right? But why was it important to the children's development? Unless I specify, unless I hone in on one part of that training that was the most meaningful to me, my story is going to be all kind of messed up, right? It's going to be all kind of mushy. It's not going to be clear and focused. So I could be talking, you know, I could say I went to this 2-day training, and then down here I say, and then, you know, I have an autistic kid and I wanted to know how to work with him. Well, okay, then that leaves me wondering, well, did you go to a session on autism or did you not? It's not clear, it's not focused. It's always easier when you pick one thing, right? Just one thing to write about. Okay, makes sense?
Yes.
Okay, did this seem really, really hard?
No.
Not hard, but involved. Mhm.
No.
Well, it's not, it's not hard, and it's not all that involved, Grantley, but it does take some thought, especially around why it's important to children's development and what the illustration, what the example is that's going to illustrate that, and that everything each question relates back to what I did, right? So again, if we said I attended a child abuse refresher training and then I went on to say something about, I scheduled a science activity, that doesn't tell a coherent story, right? What we need to do is focus in on one thing, and then we can tell that the whole entry about that one thing and answer each of those questions. Okay, so it's really fairly straightforward, but it does take some thought because I want to see evidence of why it's important to the children's development. By the way, when we get to skill area 2, which is about child development, I'm going to give you a lot of language that's going to be helpful about how you write your portfolio entry. And actually, I can show you some of that language right now. So I'm going to go into the course and find the portfolio entry assignment. Oops, I have to be in the right place. So I'm going to find this portfolio entry assignment. So there's the portfolio entry. And this is what I do when you submit your work. I go into the grading platform and I look to see for a star next to your name. If there's a star next to your name, that means I have something to grade. I have some, you've turned in an assignment that has not yet been graded. And this was actually one that Mia put in, and she did a real good job on it. So for this portfolio entry, and she talked about doing a professional development workshop for her staff, right? So again, that implies some skills, and you could be more direct about that, Mia, and say that you exercise skills in presenting to your staff, because that, yeah. Try not to imply things, say them. Be explicit, right? Be explicit. Okay. So here's what happens though when we get an entry here. I use this grading, and I say grading in kind of quotes because this isn't a credit course, but this is what Moodle calls it. So we'll call it grading in quotes. But I use this whole form to give you feedback, okay? So you see over here, there's a space for heading, right? So I'm looking for, does the heading have everything that it's supposed to have? And I'm particularly looking for the competency standard statement. Is the competency standard statement there? Because if it's there, I know that's what you're trying to prove. And so I'm going to be looking at the rest of this entry to make sure that you actually proved that you meet that standard. Make sense? Okay. So I'm looking for that, all of that in the heading. And the maximum score is 10. And Mia got 10 out of 10. In question 1, I'm looking also at does what you do meet the standard? Okay. So you can see that I left some feedback for Mia that this talks about the skills that you have now. It doesn't necessarily talk as much about the skills that you're developing. And truthfully, that developing skills is more important, is more the intent of this this skill area. But that's a common notion. That's a common assumption that a lot of students make. So that's still, you answered it well, and that still deserves a 10. So how do you do it? She reached out to everybody. She reminded people, they showed up, she did the training, right? So that also responds, that gives a 10. And again, we have one sentence, and then why is it important to you as a professional, okay? And again, this is a question that I want to see, just because your professional attitude and your personal standards come out in how you respond to this question. So you are, you're showing your philosophy. with this response. This is how Mia responded there. So if you're showing your philosophy and your attitude towards children and your attitudes towards doing a superb job with children, that earns a 10. Okay, but you can see 1 or 2 sentences that describes how this activity meets your personal and professional standards of quality. Okay, then we get to question 4. Okay, and so this is the big and important question. And so what I'm looking for is, how did the children grow cognitively, emotionally, physically, and socially? Oops, it actually says emotionally twice. Socially should be in there. That was my mistake. And then how did it meet children's needs, and specifically their needs for belonging, for independence, for mastery and learning, for generosity, to be kind to one another, for fun and stimulation. Kids need that too. So those are specific terms I love to see in response to this question. I love seeing those specific needs that are identified, and certainly safety, physical safety and social and emotional safety. Those are always things that I want to see. And this is a reminder right there, you know, this is the most important question. So I want evidence that you have thought about why this matters to help children grow. Okay, I want evidence in what you write. That's what I'm looking for. And it's also important to talk about how you teach children to have skills that help them meet their own needs. So again, that's a key element. Those two things together are important, to meet needs and to teach children skills. Those two elements are foundational to positive youth development. So that's what I want to see happen. I want to see that in this response to question 4. And what I'm looking for is a clear understanding that you understand kids, that you know what they need, you provide those needs, what you did and how you responded to question 1, that provides those needs, meets those needs, and that you're also teaching children skills. So like when we get into safety, for instance, which is skill area 3, you know, you're doing everything you can to create a safe environment to keep children safe, and you're also teaching them how to keep themselves safe. Right? Make sense? Okay. Okay. So again, I want to see the evidence that you're thinking there. And then I like examples that focus in on 1 or 2 kids. That 4th grade boy, right? And you don't have to use names, or you can make up names to protect kids. You know, you could use a fake name, just a first name. But focus your thinking about, what did this do for that kid? Because that's going to tell a really good and important story, a useful story. And it's going to be an example that I will be able to connect with, because I will probably have known a kid like that, right? And that's what you want your readers to do. You want them to connect. So when I say your readers, I mean, yeah, I read every word you say. And I also know that your advisor will read every word you say, and your endorser will read everything you say. And all 3 of us together are helping to assess your competence, the skills that you have. So you want to convince us. So write an example that is compelling about 1 or 2 kids, or a very small group of kids. And, you know, if they said something in response to something you did, tell us what they said, or tell us how what you did helped them behave better and learn better. Okay? Those are examples that really get to us. And we love to hear what kids say. Those are compelling kinds of examples. Okay. And then I always am looking also, it's only worth 5 points, but professionalism counts. So use every tool at your disposal. I love that free tool from Grammarly.com because it helps me find mistakes that I made that I might not have seen on my own. And whatever tool you use grammar check, use spell check, make sure that it looks as professional as you can possibly make it. Think about it sort of like a resume, right? You want your resume to be perfect because if an employer sees a lot of misspellings and typos on a resume, they're going to say, oh, this is a kind of a careless person. And if we see it, we might think, if this person is this careless with how they write, they might also be careless with children. And that's not what we want to see, right? So make sure it's as professional as possible. And then submit it by the deadline. And that's worth 5 points too. And if you don't submit it by the deadline, you've got 2 extra weeks before the cutoff date when the assignment is no longer available. So you'll get some points reduced there. And that's just my way to remind you that, hey, try to get there by the deadline so that you don't get behind. Because once you get behind, it's really hard to catch up. And Brantley and Monique, I know you're in that position now that you've got to play some catch up. You need to get through all the orientation learning activities so that you understand how the course works and what you're responsible to do, and submit those assignments for the first part of your portfolio, especially the portfolio entry, so that I can make sure that you and I both know you understand how you're going to proceed, because you got a lot of these to write over the course of 2 semesters.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. How long
Sure.
is this course?
How long is the course? The course
Yes, I
is,
wasn't given much detail about the course.
okay. Are you logged in yet, Monique? Have you logged into the course yet?
I did, but I was interrupted by a parent, so I didn't really get to read it in detail the way I wanted to.
Okay. All right. It's gonna show you the course schedule is listed right there. There's a course syllabus that tells you how long it is. It's a full semester. Well, it's actually 2 full semesters. So this first semester ends on December 21st, I think. And then we'll start again in January. Kind of second week of January, third week of January, I don't remember. And then that will go through the end of April. So by May 1st of next year, you should be ready to submit your request for an assessment visit. And then in May or June, your endorser, who is someone you won't know, who's somebody who will be objective about your program and about your skills, will receive from you all of your portfolio and your resource file so they can read about you beforehand. And then they will come and do an observation with you and interview with you. And they go through a very specific process so whether you're doing you're having your assessment in Brooklyn or in Buffalo, the end product will look the same, right? That it's consistent across the state. So May or June next year, if you successfully complete all of the learning activities in skill area 1 or in SAC 1, SAC part 1, and then all of the skill areas in SAC part 2, you'll have your portfolio complete. There will be a few things that you have to do on your own, but they're not very many. And your resource file either complete or very nearly complete. And so you will be ready to move on to the next steps. Okay, does that answer your question, Monique? The orientation module will answer a lot of your questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I want to show you, again, we have, you know, you've got your, nope, that was not the document I wanted to show you. You've got that portfolio template that will help you there. And I want to show you one other thing. And this is available in the orientation module. This is a downloaded item. And this is a checkoff list for you. So what I want you to do when you write a portfolio entry is to come back to this and, okay, check this off and say, okay, I wrote a portfolio entry about 1-3, and it was about a child abuse training. Okay, just like that. I want you to type that in. I want you then to save this in your own files. And I want you to, you know, mark it complete. So, okay, I did that one. So, so then you know that no other portfolio entry will be about child abuse. Okay, because you already wrote that. You want to not duplicate topics, because we don't want to have, as I think I said in the video in the orientation module, I had a student who was very into yoga, and she had probably 30 of the 42 portfolio entries talked about how she used yoga in her program. Well, that wasn't convincing me that she understood child development and offering a good and well-rounded school age care program. What that convinced me is that she should be teaching yoga, right? That's, you know, we're not credentialing yoga instructors. We're credentialing people who are in youth development and child development. So, so we want to make sure that we see different topics all here, and this tool will help you be able to keep track of that. Okay, so that's also in there. And then the other thing, there are several sheets within this Excel file. And I ask you at the end of each module to set a professional development goal for what you will do to use what you learned in the coming week. So right away, okay? So I ask you that to post that in at the end of each module. And for your own purposes, I suggest that you keep track of it and you paste it into this document too, so that you'll have a record of what you said you do. And that will be really helpful for you to know, well, did I do that or did I not do that? Okay, so this this completion form is in the orientation module too. And I guess one last thing about this portfolio entry template, this has 3 pieces to it. For your first assignment in the orientation module, I ask you to write 1 portfolio entry, because I don't want you to have to redo 3 in case you need to redo any, right? But as we get into skill area 1, you can use this template to write all 3. I suggest that you put in a page break. So insert a break right there, page break, so that it doesn't run into the next page. So you start a new page fresh every time. That's a simple thing to do. It's just under insert break, page break, and that will start a fresh page for you. But then you got one other thing to do, and that's to save this, because you have to save it before you submit it, and you need to keep it in your files. So here's what I suggest. You save as, you download the template and you make a copy of the template, you save that, but you save this as, and I would say you would number this 1 so that all of your files will line up by number. So 1 portfolio entry professionalism, right? And then you'll save it, and you'll save it in your own particular SAC file. You know, create a new folder that says SAC Credential course, and you'll save it right there. And I like to see you put your name in it, because a lot of portfolio entries, the files come through just saying portfolio entry or portfolio entry template, and that doesn't you know, if I get confused and I have to download your document, I might confuse Mia's with Monique's, and I might not know who wrote what. So put your name in it, you know, so, you know, even just your last name will be plenty there, and you can take out the template when you save it, because it's no longer template, it's actual portfolio entry. Okay. Does all that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have questions?
I have a question. If you can,
Sure.
where can I find the other form?
Which form?
It's the form behind this one.
This
Yeah,
one?
this,
That's in the orientation module. Let me show it to you. So I'm gonna go back to the orientation module, and down here, oh, see, now I may have lied to you. Okay, I may have lied to you here. I apologize, Mia. But what we will do is we'll look into the professionalism, the skill area 1 module, and voila, there it is, completion forms. Skill area 1.
okay, I see it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
that
you said,
that's the kind of question that I can easily respond to on email or through the Moodle messaging. So, you know, if you have those kinds of questions, where do I find XYZ? Those are easy questions for me to respond to, and I always will. Okay, you
and
had
you
another
said-
question, Mia?
the completion forms, you said they're due at the end of each module.
No, not exactly. Here's what. Here it is. At the end of each module, like here, this is module 1, this is skill area 1. And it says in course professional short-term goal. So that's the goal that I want you to set. It's a discussion forum. So you'll respond to this question, you know, the discussion, and you will reply, and you will enter in what is the goal you want to work on in the coming week. Now, there's not one of those, I don't ask you to set a goal in the orientation module, but by September 27th, I want you to set a goal about how you're going to try to work on your professionalism in the coming week. And that's the goal then you'll want to come back and put into this form under professionalism. Okay, make sense?
Yes.
Okay, now I will say that at the end of the whole process, you are going to be asked to set some short-term and some long-term goals for each skill area. It's too early to worry about that now. These will not be the same goals, okay? Because you will have already done that in-course goal. And now you'll be looking at some future goals. But I put that all in this one Excel file, so it was easy for you to find. Okay, but what I want you to really focus in on now are the first 2 sheets, the portfolio resource file outline, and be able to mark off those things, and then the in-course goals, just to keep track of what you said you're going to do. And by the way, I don't come back and ask you what you did, but I hope that you will do it, because when you use your learning right away, you know, that means you're really going to learn it, going to apply what you learned. And, you know, for adults, for we grown-ups, to learn something is nice, but to learn something that we actually use, that matters. That matters, and it makes it our own. So I want you to use what you learn. And I want you to use it quickly before you forget. Okay? Any other questions? Okay. So Mia, you've already turned in
Sorry, I
one
have one more question.
portfolio. Okay, Monique. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, as far as our meeting, do we meet weekly?
Okay. We don't actually meet. This is a
Okay, so it is
special,
self-taught. Okay.
this is a special clinic that I put together. We don't typically meet. I may put together another clinic at some point if I see some need for that, right? But typically what you do is you go into the module. So you go into, when you get through the orientation module, learning activities, you go into skill area 1 and you do all of these learning activities by the deadline, which is September 27th. So you do these on your own.
Okay. Okay. I
Okay.
just wanted to be clear. Yes.
When it fits, as long as it's within that 2-week period. Okay. And there is a video and guidance about deadline dates. And also there's a cutoff, there's a little grace period for each of the deadlines. But I explain all that in a video that's in the orientation module. So you'll want to do that orientation, Grantley and Monique, and anybody else who listens to the recording. You'll want to do that as soon as you can so that you can
Thank you.
really understand what's going on.
I've been doing mine. Yes.
Good.
start- Okay.
Good. That's great. I'll look forward to seeing your stuff.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate that. If you don't have any other questions, we'll let you get on with your lives.
Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you,
Okay,
Sally.
you too.
Sally.
All right.
Bye, Monique.
Stay well.
Great to meet you guys.
Okay.